Good afternoon, everyone. Hope everyone is staying safe and sane while we continue to social distance. We are pleased to welcome you to our panel, Managing Your Career During the COVID-19 Pandemic. This promises to be a timely discussion of how best to navigate your career as our firms, companies, and communities navigate through this public health crisis. Big thank you to the Asian American Bar Association for continuing to provide great programming for its membership despite the current challenges. And a special shout out to Irene Yang, Princeton Kim, and Asim Gupta of the ABBA Professional Development Committee for putting this panel together. My name is Francis Yang. I'm an associate at the law firm of Vinson and Elkins, located in the San Francisco office. I will be your moderator. Today, we have two highly experienced panelists that have used their legal careers as a platform to start their own firms to bridge gaps in the legal profession that they themselves experienced. Our first panelist, Susan Tien, is principal at Susan Tien Search. She specializes in recruiting and placing lawyers for clients ranging from venture-backed startups to Fortune 500 companies. A Harvard and Penn Law grad, she worked first as an associate at Wilson Sonsini, Goodrich, and Rosati, and then as counsel at eBay and SGI prior to starting her career in recruiting. Susan also co-authored the Vault Career Guide, Conquering Corporate America for Women and Minorities. Our second panelist, Rudhir Krishtel, is the founder of Krishtel Coaching. His team provides professional coaching and consulting for attorneys, law firms, and legal departments. Prior to becoming an executive coach and consultant, Rudhir practiced law for 15 years as a partner at Fitch & Richardson and as senior patent counsel at Apple. His lawyer days led him to train as a mindfulness and yoga instructor and also as a professional coach. His work focuses on a range of challenges attorneys face in their practice. Susan, Rudhir, welcome. Why don't you introduce yourselves to our audience and give some additional background on how you navigated your careers to this point? Why don't we start with Susan?
Great. So I'm the child of immigrants. My parents are from China, so they're really good at exhorting me to study hard and do well. But in terms of, explaining corporate America to me, they kind of did not do a good job of that. So it was natural for me to go from law school to firm and then try to go in-house, which I did, but I didn't understand how decisions are made, how people are hired, how people are judged, how to get ahead. So when I moved into recruiting, it really gives me a lot of satisfaction to be able to explain that to people. And I work with people from, how are you interviewing? What does your resume look like? This is what the hiring manager is looking for. This is how they interview. This is the offer. This is a normal answer. This is not a normal answer. So it's soup to nuts. And I work with the employers as well, so I get their unvarnished opinions. So with all these data points, I like to share them with my candidates, that's attorneys, and help them get jobs and succeed. So that's a little bit about me.
Great. Rudhir?
Yeah, so as Francis mentioned, I practiced law for 15 years, a law firm partner, and that was out in DC and out here in the Bay Area at Apple for 5 years. And after 15 years in the practice, I started to notice that there are a lot of challenges that we experience in the practice that not only affect us personally, but ultimately affect our work product. And I felt like the more senior we got in the practice, the more complex those challenges got, but there were less places to actually have open and honest dialogue around them. And so after 15 years, I noticed this trend and I decided to leave the practice. I trained for a year. And when I started up my business, I now work with lawyers one-on-one to identify the most challenging aspect of their practice, whether it be workplace politics, navigating their career, diversity-related issues. We all have these unique challenges, and sometimes the information that we get in forums is sort of one size fits all, and that's just not what's working for us. And so I work with my clients one-on-one to identify what's difficult and then move it out of the way so they have a more fulfilling practice. I also work with law firms and legal departments on shifting culture to help improve our practice. And so a lot of the work I do is also hosting workshops and dialogues on topics including mindfulness and managing and working with your imposter syndrome and leadership. And so there's a range of resources that I provide for group workshops and settings too.
That's great. Thanks, both of you. So the purpose of today's discussion is to help provide guidance for our membership on how best to navigate their careers during the pandemic. And to the audience, we'd like to make this as interactive and useful for you as possible, even though we're virtual. So to the extent you have questions as we're going through the discussion, don't hesitate to put them into the live chat. We'll try to work them into the discussion live if possible. But to get us started, Susan, Rudhir, could you both tell us what you think the best way is for attorneys to maximize their career and professional growth during this pandemic?
Yeah, so I'll go first. So we can't control so many things right now, the virus, our companies. But the thing you can control is your attitude and how hard you work. So keep a positive attitude and hustle at work. I'll talk about that a little bit more, but you need to make yourself indispensable. At the same time, you also need to be networking, because the best way to get your next job is through a referral, actually. And then to take into account the pandemic that's going on. So have a plan B ready. So if your company is taken out, your manager, your position, what are you going to do? So don't think about it only when the time comes. Think about it now. What are you going to do? Who do you know? And that's the networking portion. And then at the same time, think about where you want to go and make sure you're filling holes and getting the skills necessary for that job. So those are my top tips. We'll cover all of them more. So Rudhir.
Yeah, I think the thing that Susan tapped into that we're going to talk about more also is really just how we connect with people. I think in the situation that we're in right now, we don't have control, we don't have predictability, and that creates a lot of consternation for us. There's a lot of removal of those two aspects of our life. And I think the last thing that creates difficulty for us is a lack of social connection. But interestingly enough, there are actually a lot of ways to connect with people and network. I think people have this almost false impression that they're not able to connect with people now, but I actually think it's a great opportunity right now to connect and meet people virtually. And I feel like there's a lot of people that are doing that effectively. And so I think actually thinking and being creative with how you're able to connect with people and build relationships is extremely important right now. And I also think just staying on the path. I work with a lot of attorneys who weathered the last economic downturn, and they're all thriving. And so many years later, despite the challenges that they went through at the time, they went through a learning process. They definitely struggled. Some took very interesting career paths in order to get where they are, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. But they are all thriving and succeeding now. So I think there's this attitude and mentality on the steps you can take to really play the long game and keep that in mind. But again, we'll talk more in detail about a lot of these things.
Yeah, that's great. I wanted to kind of tap into something both of you talked about, which is attitude and hustle. And so can you elaborate more on kind of what attitude and people need to take on and how to hustle to still try to succeed during this pandemic? Maybe we'll start with Susan again.
One of the things that you need to do is make yourself indispensable at work. So if you have enough on your plate, you should still be pitching in. There's so much extra work nowadays, especially with COVID hitting legal. Like how is your company going to get people back to work? How do you deal with your suppliers? There's just 1,001 questions. So nobody should say, I'm doing my job and that's it. You need to stand out and really help people. And, and that's another way to stay positive. You can see what good you're helping people. So those are just a couple things top of mind. I'll pass on the mic to Rudhir.
Yeah, in terms of attitude and hustle, Francis, I'm curious if you're asking about sort of in your current job or when you're looking for work. And I think both, how you show up and how you are present with the people right now makes a big difference. How supportive you are, how you're looking for ways that you can reach out and connect and support people make a big difference. For people that are looking for work, I think really making sure you're staying accountable to your persistence. I feel like it is an energy draining scenario at times when you are looking for work, particularly in an environment like this. And so I think maintaining some level of accountability, making sure that there's a certain number of things you're doing a week, or that you're checking in with someone to make sure that you're really following through on the things and the leads that are out there. And I feel like making sure you're actually taking care of yourself with everything that's going on. We're really drained. I mean, this week of all weeks, I'm completely drained. Definitely, we're hitting walls right now. And so making sure you're doing the thing to take care of yourself, making sure you're doing the thing that you need to actually hit the pause button so that you're engaged and activated when you're connecting with people and interacting. I think that goes a long way.
Yeah, I think, Rudhir, you brought up a good point. There are different kind of buckets of people right now, right? There are the people who are currently employed and trying to stay busy and make themselves indispensable, but there's also people who are certainly out of work, possibly, or looking to make a job change. And I think maybe we can start with the group of people that are working right now. And I know you guys talked about making themselves indispensable. What if an attorney were to find themselves with not enough work, or there's a fear of lack of job security? How does one either broach that subject without, saying to a manager, I don't have work, right? Because that may backfire. So I'd love to hear, if you have strategies on what they can do in that situation.
I think the easiest thing to do is to pick up adjacencies. Like if you're in product, pick up privacy. If you're in privacy, pick up product. Or if you're in IP, maybe you want to do open source, whatever. Just things that you're very close to doing and you get exposed to. Just make sure you do a lot more of it. And I would just volunteer to the overworked lawyers who'd be very, very happy to take on your, hey, I'll look up this issue and I'll run with it. I think those are just two easy things to do. I'll pass it on to Rudhir.
Yeah, I think being curious, having a healthy curiosity on what people's challenges are right now. It may not be in the area of work that you are most comfortable, but people have everyone is overwhelmed right now. And even though certain areas may be light, there are problems to be solved, whether there are client problems or problems with the organization. And so it's trying to be curious around what are some of the challenges that are happening right now, and having conversations with people to try to figure out how you can be supportive. I think like a business person. Business people are always thinking about their clients and wondering ways that they can sort of create new products or create new ways to support people. And I think often as lawyers, we're sometimes early trained to just wait for the project. But I think you can activate yourself a little bit to start being curious. Hey, what are some things that are happening that we need support on? When times are difficult like this, there's always room for improving systems. And so it might not even be directly related to the other things in the organization that need support right now, that need improvement. And so being really curious about where you could be supportive and really sort of engaging and stepping into that is a great way. And I think it's also a great time for skills building, thinking about other things that you're picking up right now that might be supportive to your career in the long term. If things are feeling light, there is so much information to be gained, and there's certifications and there's training online. I feel like there's a lot of opportunity to keep yourself active in this moment.
Yeah, I think both of you talked about kind of the social aspect and the networking piece and staying connected with people. I think maybe I'd like to focus on another thing you talked about, or both talked about, which was skills building. Is there, in the time of a pandemic or of the pandemic or of a downturn, I know, Rudhir, you mentioned the previous downturn, a significant downturn in 2007, 2008. Are there skills, like substantively or soft skills, that you think are particularly in demand in a recession, Rudhir?
Well, I think that, there are always leadership skills that we can be investing in. That is not something that we're ever in short supply of. And so even in this moment, for example, get engaged and find ways to improve on how you do stand-up work, how you engage with an audience. There's a lot of opportunities right now to speak on platforms like this or organize an event where you're still sharing. The ability to do an incredible presentation online, I don't know that a lot of people are doing that necessarily. And so if you're able to get organized and work with your local organization and start becoming active and work on some leadership skills like doing an online presentation, that's one thing that I think has a lot of value right now. How to convene how to really convene and make people productive in this moment is a skill that I think people can really step into. And so in terms of leadership skills, how you manage up, how you work with others, how well you connect with people, establishing your presence, all of these are tools and skills that you can continue to evolve through your career. And there's no shortage of reading, of videos, or opportunities to practice these things if you continue to look to create them.
Susan, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I would say, so there's two skills, the hard skills and the soft skills. So the hard skills in a pandemic, how do you pick, right? In addition to what you're doing. So if you want to start thinking about how do I land the job that is secure and that is hiring, think about who is hiring and what skills are needed. So the technologies would be, relating to life sciences, video collaboration, media streaming. All three of those areas are hiring like crazy, as well as like the big companies, the Amazons, the Facebooks, they're hiring like crazy. So, what skills do they need? Those are the hard skills. And the soft skills, to echo Rudhir, for sure, you always need strong communication skills, especially as a lawyer, because you have to be speaking truth to power. You have to distill. And then from my perspective, you have to know how to present in a way that will be heard. To be charming as a lawyer is very important. And then how to interview and present. And each of those topics could be hours and hours of discussion and learning. And there's so much free podcasts, TED Talks, et cetera, that people should really take advantage of. For example, for a soft skill, I was just listening to a podcast by a top vocal coach. She teaches actors, CEOs, how do you speak in a way to be heard. And one tip she got from George Clooney, the actor whom she interviewed, that she says she uses every day is when you greet someone, whether it's, via video call or in person, George Clooney says he tries to treat that person like he's talking to an old friend. And then when you do that and you smile and you try to bring up that warmth, it will reciprocate. So those are just tiny nuggets that you can learn free on the internet that will go a long way and you can do every day in your actual practice. That's it.
That's great. Now, if I say were to, like, before the pandemic, I was thinking about maybe moving jobs. Like, would you say that now is not, if I was thinking about moving, now is maybe not a good time to move jobs? Or what would the plan be
Right.
now that, kind of we're all working from home and such?
So I would say you should be a little wary about changing jobs now, because often the last in is the first out, right? So you don't want to be that last person in, because the reason why is also you don't have the executive support or your managerial support if you're new. So, to counteract what I just said, if it's someone that and you've built a rapport and can protect you, I think that's helpful. The other thing that I would say, and is exception to being really wary, is like, say you hate your job and you're dying to get out of, making this up, you're dying to get out of patent into product, and here's your one chance, and you're going to take it. Sure, I would say go for it, because the worst case scenario is at least now you have product experience and you can always go back to being a patent attorney.
Yeah, thinking about the people that might be, looking for a way to leave and make a transition right now because they're unhappy. I think we can make revolutionary changes in our career, but I think we can also make evolutionary changes. And so maybe it's a time to think about improving that relationship with the person that's causing you difficulty rather than just leaving the company, or maybe finding ways to take on different responsibilities that you enjoy more rather than just making that shift. I think I'd be very cautious in this environment to be looking for work, but I also think there's no harm to look. I just know that there's going to be a lot of challenge in that process. There's no harm in taking time and looking for other opportunities, so long as it's not leaving you with that one foot out the door mentality that sometimes we take on when we're actively searching. And so you want to be really thoughtful about that. It's an important time to really continue to maintain healthy relationships with where you are. And so I'd really emphasize the importance of finding ways to improve relationships, improve the things that you're working on, and try to shift responsibility in ways that make you maybe happier with where things are right now.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting. And I wanted to kind of talk about something that I think both of you mentioned, and talking about, I think, Rudhir, earlier you mentioned managing up, and just now you were talking about kind of evolutionary change, where you try to develop better relationships maybe with higher ups who are, maybe you're unhappy because your relationship with your boss isn't great. One way to kind of stay in your current position and make yourself happier is to develop that relationship. I think Susan touched on this too. Do you have any strategies for ways to kind of overcome the issues that we have now that we're all working from home, try to develop better relationships with your people who are giving you work or who are your bosses?
I'll let Rudhir go.
Okay, great. I was going to check in with Susan to see if she wants me to start. If you're not in an office with people, now that we're not in an office with people, we're not getting a lot of that in-person contact and interaction. So I think it's actually a moment to increase the touch points with the people that you work with, finding ways to increase the touch points. With some of the partners and managers that I work with, I'm inviting them to set up more coffees and more open forums and office hours with their team so that people can just pop in and have dialogue. Everybody's going through something right now. There's no harm in you just being the person that checks in on what's going on with people and how they're doing, and creating social moments. And so setting up coffee, setting up social interactions with people on your team. I have clients that are setting up poker games with their team, setting up virtual dinners, ordering pizza for folks and bringing them together. They're doing things right now and finding ways to engage and interact, to build relationships, build healthier relationships. And I think you want to really think about, well, since that time is now taken away and that interactivity is taken away, how am I upping the game? Am I interacting a little bit differently on these calls? Am I a bit more active in my listening? Am I a bit more connecting with the people that I'm working with? How am I able to support them with the challenges that they're experiencing? And how am I able to resolve problems at work? And so thinking a little bit differently, we're in a different moment. You can't lean on the same way that you related to people in the past. And so I think there's a lot of ways to sort of increase and improve your relationship. And I think that, again, as we talked about building soft skills, I think there's just a whole body of information there on how you improve and build better relationships. And if this is a time worth investing in that, I think there's a lot of information and material that you can lean on to help grow that part of your network internally at work.
I guess the thing I would also add, I totally agree with Rudhir, you got to increase your touch points. You don't have to think of the touch points as like a heavy burden. Like if you read the New York Times, the Recorder, the Wall Street Journal, there's going to be stories, there's going to be facts. Just send them to people that you think would find them interesting. And that's an easy touch point. They can engage. They know you're thinking about them. And I think the issue with lawyers is, our jobs are to be transactional. So we are often like that in our social life, which is super off-putting, right? Like sometimes I have people who don't reach out to me for years and suddenly they're like, oh, hello, Susan, I haven't talked to you in 10 years and I need a job now. So that's not ideal. You need to be staying in touch with people constantly in a warm, non-demanding way. Like, for example, I just got a great email from a friend who was like, oh, hey, here are the latest tips on how Hollywood experts say is a great way to do a video conference, right? So obviously she thought about what would be interesting to me and sent it. And I thought, oh, that was so nice. So those are just like, I just want to point out there's low hanging fruit. You don't have to be playing poker, which is a great thing too. But, it doesn't have to be a big deal. Just stay at it.
And just to follow up, I coach attorneys on business development as an example. And when we talk about business development, the same applies here with networking. Typically, when you have relationships with people, there's people that know you, there's people that like you, and there's people that trust you. How are you moving people along that spectrum? The people that know you, how are you moving them along the spectrum to like? How are you moving the people that you have a healthy relationship with to a relationship of trust? And actually really thinking critically about it. What are the things that you do that builds relationship? And Susan mentioned it. Someone sends an email that's helpful to her, she's connected up with that person. And so finding ways to help people is a great way to build relationship. I welcome people to keep sort of an internal CRM, a list of all of their contacts and how they are literally supporting them so that you're actually improving relationship with all of them. Are they know people? Are they like people? Are they trust people? And how am I moving them along? You never know a year or two from now, the people and the relationships that you develop, how they're going to be serving you down the road. So this isn't a moment to just sort of hit the pause button on relationship building. I think you can think really thoughtfully about, sending articles, sending a message, just to check in. Hey, how are you doing? Been thinking about you this week of all weeks. People that are feeling even that much more complex and challenging. Just connecting. I mean, what we're out here to do in the world is actually help people, whether as a lawyer or otherwise. And there are many ways to do that right now that can help you build relationships. So thinking almost critically about, if I need to build relationships with people that are in positions that may be able to support me now or later, finding ways to help them, simple ways in the way that Susan mentioned, even more complex ways, but really thinking about ways that you can support people so that you're continuing that sort of chain of support. And when you call Susan and you ask her for a favor.
That's funny. Certainly it feels a little bit more organic when you were already talking to the person before you needed something.
So it's not even that I'm so appalled that they do that to me. It just makes me a little fearful they don't have very strong social skills. Seriously, that's what I'm concerned about. Are they going to just blurt out things to the employer, the interviewer, or are they going to be able to make it a smooth, graceful social interaction? So.
I see. The recruiter in you is not so sure that they're a great candidate. I see.
Correct.
Well, I think it's interesting about what you said, and something that I've noticed in kind of when we're social distancing now is that I don't see my colleagues that I work with as much as I used to, but the colleagues that I have that are in other offices, I see way more, right? Because before we didn't do as many video conferences, but now because video conferencing is so common, I can now see the whole litigation group more often, because even though they're in Dallas, New York, whatever, where we have a weekly check-in or something like that where everyone can attend. So certainly, I wonder if do you guys see that as a point where there's actually us being at home and being in the pandemic is actually helping some types of social connection?
Yeah, absolutely. Because most people are home. They're literally at their desks and they're not, off to a client for a meeting or something like that. So chances are you're able to catch people. So yeah, I highly recommend reaching out to people.
Look, we got a need for human connection. We are social beings. This is something that we have to have. And so we're going to find our way to do it. And I think we want to tap into that. You want to tap into the idea that actually people want to connect right now. They want to connect more than they have been before, and they're going to be creative and find different ways to do it. So if that's something that, if you're able to set up situations and scenarios, whether it just be picking up the phone, sending a text, or setting up a video call, whatever it might be, I think it's an opportunity right now to really kind of build. We build relationships in many ways. And when I think about building relationships, I think about the relationships that you have in your life. Think about who are the close people in your life, and how did you get there? It's often that they helped you through something, you helped them through something, or that you endured something together. We're all enduring something together right now. So it's a very, very, I think, a real opportunity to connect, because people are looking for that, and you can easily support someone with whatever's happening. And so folks want to have team calls, jump on them. Folks want to interact by video, do it, because I think people are looking for more of it. I think it's a great way to continue to build.
Yeah, that's really interesting that you said that. I also wanted to follow up on one other, the acronym you used, CRM. What is that? Can you?
Oh yeah, I shouldn't be. It's actually, I always forget what CRM stands for, but it's client, not client resource management. It's client relationship management. So client relationship management, and basically for me, it's a spreadsheet. For a lot of people, it's something like Salesforce. People have very complex CRMs, or people have very simple ones. But it's really just a list of people that you are building and maintaining your relationships with. And I think when you're looking for, first, whether or not you're looking for work, you should always be cultivating your relationships, because your relationships in the end, Susan and I will both tell you, in the long arc of your career, that's what's going to get you your next job. That's what's going to get you at the top of a pile, is knowing somebody, is actually being connected with them. When I think about success, another acronym that I love throwing out is the PI model. P stands for performance, I for image, and then E for exposure. 10% of success is performance. We're all very activated to do amazing things in our job, but 10% of success is just how you're doing your job. 30% is image. And I'm not just saying what you look like, because then I'd be hosed, but I'm saying how people receive you. Do they find you to be a kind person? Do they find you to be upstanding? Do you have integrity? Like, how are people, what are the qualities about you that they remember? That's your image. 60% of success is exposure. Otherwise, it's a tree falling in a forest and nobody's hearing it. You have to get out and get connected with people. And so this is the transition to the CRM is you want to make sure that people know who you are, know what you're doing, know what you're about, know what your skills are, and know just what you're about, what your ethos is. And I think the more people that you connect with, the more you build relationships with, they're going to serve you in ways for years down the road. Susan and I have known each other for 10, maybe 15, 10 years at least. Mm-hmm. And I've worked with Susan a few times in my career. When I'm looking for work, back when I was practicing, I'd reach out to her, every few years, work with her as a mentor and a guide. We trade pictures on our, about our families, and we have a personal relationship and a professional one. And even now we continue to think about ways to support each other. That relationship has evolved over 10 years. The number of people that her and I could list that fall in that category are pretty significant. I know I can speak for the two of us. When you have a long career, so much of your buoyancy and your success is built upon the health of the many relationships you have. And so I think being really thoughtful about that, having a list, seeing who's on it, growing the relationships, being intentional, and really being persistent with it will go a long way.
Yeah, and I like what you said earlier too about us all enduring something together, because it's really an easy icebreaker, right? If you're checking in on somebody, whereas before maybe it would be a little more awkward, maybe you don't have a whole lot to talk about, you feel like you're reaching out of the blue. But now you can check in with someone and say, hey, with everything going on, how are you doing? Especially with kind of, like you have been mentioning, the events that have happened kind of in the last couple of days.
Crazy.
Is like a great touch point to, one, be empathetic and, share with somebody, but also to build your network as well in a way that's sincere, I suppose.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to catch in on that sincere, because some of this may feel disingenuous, and that is not what we're getting at. It is not about disingenuous contact, using a moment like this to reach out to people. That's not what I'm touching.
People can feel it too.
Yeah. What's that?
People can feel it if it's disingenuous.
That's right. Just when it's in your presence. What I'm saying is that, look, even in your job as a privacy attorney, you are supporting a company and helping them in secure their product against the challenges that the world creates for it. You're helping in some way. As you reach out and build relationships, you are also helping. So you're just activating the part of you, the natural part of you that is able to connect up with people and find ways to support. Don't feel like that is limited to this, single work product role or the thing that people are asking you to do. Continue to find ways to help people. If I see an article that I think Susan would find interesting, send it to Susan, and she'll remember, and she'll say, oh, Rudhir's being helpful, etc. Like, there are things that you can do right now to help people. It doesn't have to be in the lane of the job that you're doing. Continue to find many ways to help people. Be sincere about it. That's what's going to build relationship, and over time, people will remember that.
So I want to add that I believe, you can tell Rudhir and I, we believe you should be kind to everybody in general and try to help. Because if you're like, this is quid pro quo, then you're going to be disappointed. It actually, because every person that you help is not going to turn around and help you. So you're casting a wide net, and it's the same with networking in general. You're not saying, I'm going to get to know you because you are helpful to me for X. Right? You don't know where the roads go. So that's why you need to cast a wide net. And the worst case scenario is you're a good person. It's really a win-win for everybody.
I am curious. We haven't seen a lot of questions come in. And so, Susan, I would love, rather than just wax philosophical on the things that we think are important, we'd love to actually address something specific that somebody is facing or has a challenge with. So if there's anything that you find in particular that is complex, just bring it. We'd love to share, whatever experience we have and let you know. And also, we'd just love to have an idea of the people that are here. If you want to maybe even give an indication of the number of years you've been in the practice, just to get an idea of who's here, so that whatever it is that we're sharing out, we're making sure is relevant.
Right.
But any questions that you have, we welcome it, and then turn it back to Susan and Francis.
Yeah, absolutely. We actually have our first question. So we have someone asked, how do you find people to get connected with to make these relationships? Like, how do you start that CRM, I suppose they're asking?
I'd love to take this first. It really, I think part of it can be, where do you see yourself in 5 years? Let's start there. Where is it that you see yourself? Where do you want to take your practice? Where do you want to take your career? What does it look like? What are the companies that are involved? What are the types of experiences? What's the job? What does it look like? And who might be supportive in that? Like, who do you see there? Who are the people that might be supportive for that? I think we can reach out to people in all kinds of ways. Obviously, there are just cold connections through LinkedIn. Second connections on LinkedIn are very simple. Having someone in common connect you with somebody, setting up an informal coffee, and then making sure you're keeping them on a list of things to follow up. I think it takes 6 to 8 connections with somebody to build a healthy relationship. Just think back on your life. Think about the healthy relationships you have, the people that you trust. We go to, Susan and I attend the NAPABA conference every year. We see everyone every year. Sometimes we don't see them until then. But once you attend 8 of those, you feel like you're with family. And so it just takes a little while to connect with people. And so really starting to envision, who are the people I want in my life in 4 or 5 years? What are the types of people? Do I want them to all be lawyers? Do I want them to be business people? Do I want them to be artists? Or whatever it is that you want, start thinking about cultivating those relationships. There are meetup groups. There are conferences that are happening virtually right now. A lot of people are having virtual meetings right now through their organizations. So getting active in an organization now and doing virtual connecting, I think, goes a really long way. And so I find, if I'm ever looking for anything or anyone, I just find ways to reach out. It usually takes 1 or 2 phone calls to find the person that you want. And I think people love to talk about themselves. I think you give somebody an opportunity to talk about what they're doing, they're happy to do it. They don't get that enough right now, especially in this moment. No one's getting to talk about what's going on for them. And so create opportunities or excuses to reach out to people directly or indirectly through your network. Be curious. Go back into your LinkedIn, dump it out, take a look. I bet you there's a bunch of people there that you haven't even connected back up with in a long time. Your alumni association from your law school, your undergrad alumni association. There's so many places. There's just people out there that want to connect right now. We're missing it. And so I sort of think about, what is it that you want your world to look like in 5 years? Do you want it filled with, business folks that are clients? Do you want it filled with, I want to be an attorney for artists, so I want to connect up with many artists. Like, whatever it is that you're thinking about, you want to go towards, start meeting with those people now. Find the organizations. Look, all of these people that you want to connect with are gathering somewhere. There are organizations that are bringing together now because people still need to connect. And so find the places that they're gathering and join those groups and reach out and make yourself supportive and helpful.
So to echo what Rudhir is saying, I totally agree with the working backwards. And then, so with respect to not just connecting in general, but with your career, where do you see yourself? Where do you want to be? And then there are a lot of databases online, like the Mercury News has it, or just email me and I'll send you their last database of the top 150 companies in the Bay Area. And that way you have a complete universe of the big companies anyway. And say, oh, I really like SaaS, or I really want to learn more about fintech, or I think AI is the way to be. Who are the top AI players? Who are the top, semiconductor players, et cetera? And then winnow it down, and then get on LinkedIn tactically. Who do I know that knows these people? And then ABBA, APABA, NAPABA, these are all fantastic resources. Like, people join these groups to connect with people, so they're not going to be offended. And exactly as Rudhir said, if you ask people I see you worked at Apple, can you introduce me to Joe Blow at Apple? All right, that's not going to work. But I see you're at Apple. That's so amazing that you went from here to there. I would love to hear more about it. I find that super inspiring. People, would love to talk about that. And then another way to connect with people, in addition just to looking on LinkedIn, who do I know, is get to be known in that space that you want your job or where you want to go. And then when you become a speaker on a subject, then people will know you as the expert and reach out to you. So that's a positive thing. So you're not like trying to meet people, people are coming to you. And then the second thing is when you're actually going for a job and you're interested in, whenever there's a job opening, there's like a giant internal list of people who want that job. And then there's a giant external list of people who want that job. What you want to be is you want that company to think of you and say, oh, I remember this up and coming person in the field of privacy, what have you, and I want to have them on my short list. So you have to even enter their universe of, of people they interact with. So you can think tactically of how you want to get there. But first you have to think about where you want to be and then work backwards after that.
Yeah, just tagging on to what Susan mentioned in her first response, you mentioned a local list. Fast Company has constant lists of different places that, different categories of companies. MIT Technology Review, like if you're looking to get into a certain sector or a certain area, or you want to be at a socially responsible company, look at lists, try to engage. Not all of these companies engage or have the resources to, post and find employees in the way that, a lot of these large companies do. And so you want to really connect up and find ways to build relationships with industries that you find interesting. What is the thing that you want to do in the world, and who's doing that thing, and how do you connect up with them? And so you can be really intentional. I have a friend that just, in-house counsel, friend and client actually, that's in-house counsel that loves education work. But, the education jobs aren't popping up on LinkedIn. She's got a CRM that's just sort of building this vast list of all of the companies that are doing online education right now, which are of course growing in this moment. And she's slowly, week by week, building relationships, starting to connect, understanding what the organizations are, starting to speak on topics. And so there's just a nice evolution there of how you can sort of build relationships in an industry or field that you really want to be in down the road.
Yeah, I think that those are all like really, really great tips. And also I'll just put a small plug for ABBA right now. I think Susan mentioned that you can, like, these bar organizations are great ways to meet all sorts of people. Like, for example, if you wanted to know Susan, you're both in ABBA. So if you're not a member, you should become a member, because even virtually, ABBA is trying to make ways for us to connect with other people. And it's a great way to follow up and be like, I saw you spoke on this panel. I really liked what you had to say. I'd love to connect briefly on, over coffee or just chat briefly. And so definitely would support that. And it's a way that I think all of us have probably built a lot of our connections is through these bar associations, just like you mentioned of ABBA.
I want to add that speakers of panels expect to be contacted, and we expect to help people after. So we are not scary people. So, it's if we're joining this type of organization, then we want to help, especially partners at firms are often circulating. We see senior in-house people circulating. They expect the younger generation to have questions for them and want to help. Frankly, that's why they're here. So don't feel, and I just want to go off a little bit on, I feel like Asian Americans are overly polite. I've done a lot of these seminars. Yeah. And I'll be speaking to a room of 100 people, and then we'll be like, any questions? And everyone's all quiet. And there'll be a non-Asian person who always raises their hand first. It's like, really, as a culture, we should just reach out a little bit more.
Yeah, nobody on these panels, Susan and I included, are that important. Like, you want to connect. We are here to help you. We sign up for this to help and be supportive. We're just looking for ways to make sure that everyone out there is succeeding. And so please do not hesitate to reach out and connect up with us and ask us personal questions. And wherever you are, wherever discussion you're in down the road, the whole point is we're trying to find ways to connect up with people too. And you are also gather information, share information, find support, give support. And so these opportunities are created for this. So always reach out and connect with folks and stay in touch.
Yeah, so we actually have a question that came in that I think is something that is really important to touch on now, and maybe is the opposite of something we touched on before, which is about hustle and being indispensable and kind of keeping your foot on the gas. Someone was interested in hearing about your thoughts about managing fatigue and stress, especially with the pandemic, the things that have been happening the past couple of days, just 2020 in general. Do you have any advice on how to kind of manage your mental health while continuing to stay employed and that sort of thing?
Rudhir.
I'm going to volunteer for this one. Yeah, I got this. I think it's imperative. I think it's very critical to make sure you are spending time on cultivating and nourishing and nurturing your mental health and doing things that are restorative for you, especially for people that are either looking for a job and all of us that are just currently being drained by everything that's happening. Finding healthy ways to process, finding healthy ways to set boundaries. It's very easy right now. There's no wall between home and work. It's just constant. And so my wife and I, as an example, we have, no device policy on our main floor. So when we're on the office level, we have bedrooms up here that are offices. And then when we go downstairs, we leave the devices up here. And so every morning between 7 and 9 and every evening between 5 and 8, there's no devices. And I think that's just something that we have to sort of counterbalance all of the interactivity. We do device-free Saturdays, the whole weekend, sunset on Friday until sometimes sunrise on Monday. We just take a device Sabbath and we just sort of stay disconnected. I am a huge proponent of practicing meditation, practicing yoga, something physical and something mental. Checking in every day, scoring yourself 0 to 10. How's my mind? How's my body? What's the score I'm giving it today? And just kind of tracking it and then doing the things to cultivate a really sort of a better mental health. And so I've been practicing meditation for many years. I have a weekly mindfulness seminar that's free right now on Wednesday mornings. I welcome people to come to my website and check that out. I think it's listed on the workshops page, but you can just visit and you can engage in daily practice. There's many apps that are now available, Headspace, Calm, all sorts of things that are there to sort of keep people cultivating a healthier presence and relationship with themselves. Be accountable for your physical workouts. Check in with your nutrition. When I left Apple, the first appointment I made was with a nutritionist. All of these scenarios are available remotely right now. And so you can connect up with whoever it is that you want to learn and keep you accountable to really anything to make sure you're taking care of yourself. And I would really invest in that, the things that you need to take care of yourself. And so there's a lot there. I could talk about this topic for a day, but I think the thing in this moment that really I want to reemphasize is taking the moment to set your boundaries and really just knowing, here are my limits right now. I'm noticing, I have clients that used to bill 10, 11, 12, 13 hours a day, and they hit a wall at 8.5 right now. They just can't get past it, especially on a week like this. I mean, if you were able to work on Friday or Monday this week, God bless you, because I had to take Monday off. And I took it off. I cleared the day and just spent it with my wife. We both cleared our days. We need those things. We need those mental health days. We need those hours, and we need those boundaries. And so I welcome you to set them. I welcome you to take time to breathe. I welcome you to take time to spend time in nature when you can in a healthy way right now. But make a list of the things that are restorative for you. What's restorative? And you'll notice they're all free. They're all very accessible. They're all very, things that you can do in a short amount of time. But I think keep that list close right now and really build a relationship with it.
So Rudhir, just so I know you had super stressful jobs before. What do you think, if you could go back in time and tell yourself, here's the number one thing you should be doing? Would it be like meditation or setting boundaries? What do you think you would have heard and been willing to do when you were, climbing the associate to partner ladder or working at a 24/7 company?
For everything we're doing, personally, meditation was the biggest shift that happened in my life. I was in my first year at Apple, and that's when I paid for my first class. I'd been meditating on and off before that. I'd been practicing yoga for many years. The meditation I sort of came into when I started working at Apple, and I paid for a class. And when I paid for a class, that's the engagement that got me committed to 20 minutes twice a day. And when I started meditating 20 minutes twice a day, my entire relationship with everything changed. I went from, when I was at the firm, my stress was, doctor would ask me 0 to 10, what's your stress? And I'd be 12. as a litigator, you're almost sort of proud of sort of putting yourself in a stressful situation. When I got to Apple, it was maybe a 7. Regular sleep at night can do that. So that was a nice shift to be at a company that allowed me to sleep between midnight and 6. But that wasn't the case in the firm. But when I started practicing meditation, slowly stress went down from a 7 to a 2. And I'll never forget the doctor's appointment at Apple when they said, "What's your stress like?" And I said, "It's a 2 out of 10. And they said, "How are you a 2 in the legal department at Apple?" And I said, "Well, that's what do you do?" And I'm like, "Well, I do IP work." And they're like, "You're doing IP work here at Apple and you're a 2 out of 10. Like, what's going on with you?" And it was my mindfulness practice. I was a company witness at Apple, testifying, every month on a camera. No lawyer wants to be in the hot seat. And I found myself very, very calm and very gathered. It was the thing that allowed me to not only take care of myself, but also be very present with whatever was going on. And so if you have not yet cultivated a meditation or mindfulness practice, back then, when I talk about meditation at work, people sort of looked at me like I was crazy. And when I went on my first meditation retreat for 10 days, people were like, "What is Rudhir doing?" It's very sort of part of the culture now in the Bay. And so I feel like for those of you who don't have a practice, I feel like a lot of people do, but if you do, I welcome you to sort of deepen it, because I think there's a lot there.
Yeah, that's I've been thinking about doing that, so maybe I need to get on that as a law firm associate. Maybe meditating is a good idea, and certainly I've been trying to kind of set boundaries. I mean, now, like, I worked a lot before, but now, like, there's no separation. Like, I commute to my desk from my bed, but I'd be interested to hear also, kind of, Susan, what you've done to give yourself some separation or kind of protect your mental health.
So I don't know if this is a good answer, but how I protected my mental health is I got out of law. I'm totally serious, because my issue is, I think I need to meditate, is I have that 24/7, like, there's no end to thinking about an issue, right? There's always new law. Whereas recruiting, what I like is there's very clear metrics and it's very clear what I can do and what I cannot do. And after that, and so I found a job that suited where my personality went, and then my stress level totally dropped off. So even if people are pissed off at me or whatever, it'll pass. Whereas when I practiced law, they were my client and I had to deal with them all the time. So it's just, I just chose things that worked for me.
How did you come to that realization? Was it like light bulb? Like, when did that happen?
Yeah, so I did the firm thing, which I enjoyed actually, but it was good training. Then I went in-house, and it was the office politics that just killed me. Because as I mentioned, my parents are immigrants, like, do a good job, then you'll be rewarded. And it was like, I do a good job, my clients love me, my boss hates me. Oh my God, now what do I do, right? And so I just got very, like, frustrated with that. And then I changed companies where I didn't have, a boss that I couldn't get along with on any level, like nobody could. But at the new job, at that point, I just noticed, my heart's not into this. I have this other talent with recruiting, so maybe I'll just give it a shot. And it turned out I really, really liked it. So,
yeah, maybe that's a good also transition into kind of how do you now you've both said it's possibly not the best time to be searching, but if you find yourself furloughed or reduced hours or something like that, like, how do you try to find, like, a good fit for you?
I mean, I would just talk to as many people doing that potential job as you can, and try to take on, assignments, learn about it. I know if you're furloughed, this doesn't work. But for example, a lot of lawyers ask me, how do I switch into biz dev or the business side? Or if you're doing M&A, can you switch to corp dev or finance? If you can do it within your big company, I would say that's probably ideal. If you're at a Cisco or Facebook and you just swap roles for someone you're supporting, I think that would be great, because that's more baby steps. And I know someone who, for example, at Facebook, who switched, didn't like it, was welcomed back with open arms at legal. So you're not, like, leaving a company, doing a major change, and then, oh God, now what do I do? So, definitely research.
I see it's like a try before you buy situation. If
you should try. And plus, no one's going to try you. You have to show that you can do the job. So you have to be doing that work anyway. So.
Yeah, that makes sense. So maybe more on that topic, like, I think you spoke a little bit about this before, Susan, that there are certain industries that are definitely hiring now. Yeah. But how would you like suggest people go about job searching nowadays? Maybe it's not different. Maybe there's just different jobs that are available, but what's like the process that you would take?
So, what are my skills? Who needs my skills? Who do I know at those companies that would need me? Do I have a body of work to show it? If I don't, what do I need to do? Do I need to get CIPP certified? Do I need to pick up programming? Whatever. Now's the time to go fill in those holes, as I mentioned. Those are the main steps.
Yeah. Right. We did touch on the networking piece. Do you feel like the process for hiring has changed at all in like pandemic land? Well, of course, we're all virtual, so most people are probably doing interviews, video conference.
Right.
But do you think the process has changed other than that?
Yeah, it has. So one major change is the market dynamics have changed. So the employers hold all the power. Before, it was the candidates holding the power because we had 5 years of just the economy taking off. Everyone was fighting over the same people who could say, if you don't give me X, I'm going to take it at this other company. Now the leverage is gone. Just to give you a little example, I was doing a search for a public company. They approached me right before the pandemic hit because they thought they weren't going to have a problem filling this very senior role. The pandemic hit, and then I was able to, source a really good list for them. And then they said, okay, we'll talk to your top 3 because meanwhile, we got 150 resumes that came in that are all pretty decent. And that's a major shift in what happened to the market. Separate from the power dynamics, the process is a lot faster and it's a lot smoother if you can conquer video conference interviewing. If you can do that, then you're golden. Because right now, I think it's fewer rounds and it's a lot faster because companies want to fill before they lose their headcount. So I would say a typical process would be at least 6 weeks before, and now it's closer to 3 or 4. Like they get the rec, they line up first round video conference with the hiring manager. Next week, they get their top 3 to do like 5-person panels. Maybe you have a CEO on top of that or a CFO or a business person, and then they're done. Whereas before, just even getting someone to physically interview and come in took a lot longer because we're not all just trapped at home. And then in addition, say like the CFO was busy that day, then they would call that poor person to go back into the office some other week and a half in advance later. And it just took freaking forever. Whereas now it's like, bam, bam, bam. Oh, you missed the CFO. Let's do it tomorrow at 9. Done. And then they can make decisions faster. So it is a lot about how do you present and can you speak to that tiny pinhole and have the smile on your face and articulate your, your points clearly. So that's the same skills. It's just even harder. It's more performance art now.
Yeah. And I think maybe like the video conferencing thing, maybe you could elaborate a little more on that because that also goes to, it's not just interviewing, right? Like now we all present, like the 3 of us are here trying to present on video. What, do you have any tips for people on that?
Yeah. So, number one, understand the technology. So audience members, just so you know, Ava put in serious hours making sure we were all able to speak, our AV worked, how to seamlessly get our names on, so it takes a lot of time. So don't call in expecting the technology to work. So no, Zoom, WebEx, BlueJeans, whatever. Try to practice a little bit and know it's not going to work. So that's the technology piece. And then the second is presentation piece. You have to dress professionally and without checks on your shirt. And then where I am, here's a little example. You're supposed to be able to put your hand on top of your head, and that's where your head is supposed to be. So there's all these, you need to be centered. Yeah. And some people just have their laptop, so they're at this weird chin angle, which is weird. And then make sure your background.
That's awesome.
Rudhir is now adjusting himself to make sure he is fitting.
The last 10 seconds of this panel, I'm in good shape.
It's funny that we're ending on this note because we should have started with us suggesting with Susan's tips. But everyone, really appreciate your joining today. It's all the time we have. So please join me in giving a virtual thank you to our 2 panelists, Susan, Tien, and Rudhir Krishtel. As they said, they're open to have you send them questions afterwards, and that they do this because they care.
Check out our websites. Like I have a ton of info on my blog, I'm sure, and on my website. I'm sure Rudhir does too. So that could be like low-hanging fruit if you're afraid to like ping us. But there's a lot of resources.
Yeah, and also if you enjoyed our program, the link to join ABBA is right there, easy for you. So please do so if you'd like more content like this. And please enjoy the rest of your Wednesday.
Okay.
See you all later.
Thanks. Thank you.